Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Fitness for Life podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Lohr, and today I have with me Taylor Temple. Taylor, thanks for coming on. I'm really excited for our conversation today. Um,
Right
yeah,
on.
if
Thanks,
you
Jackson.
yeah, if you want to go ahead and kind of introduce yourself, tell people a little bit about your story in terms of being introduced to fitness, and then kind of leading up to where you are now and what you do for people. I'd love to hear it.
Absolutely. So, Mind and Body by Temple is all about the mindset as well as the physical well-being. So that's kind of my whole picture of my business. So taking a background of psychology, competitive sports, and then I dabbled in bodybuilding a little bit as well.
Yeah.
Few first place trophies back there and some overall wins.
Hey, well done.
um, Thank you. And then coming from personal training background, corporate management of gym background.
Okay.
And then I did work hand on hand. I launched a small boutique gym as well.
Very
Stepped
cool.
away from that and then went full time in Mind and Body by Temple again. So it is
Gotcha.
a personal training and an online coaching business. So Mind and Body by Temple is a holistic health and wellness company. I
Yeah.
specifically specialize in pain-free movement and then weight loss, but specifically women's hormones.
Okay.
And that is the big picture of Mind and Body by Temple.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that and that nice little summary. I'm curious for you. You know, you've competed. It sounds like you've worked in pretty much every aspect of fitness to some degree in terms of like having the online business, having the your own boutique studio, working for a commercial gym. You know, what got you introduced to that, and where did your love of fitness start for you?
Yeah, great. So actually at the age of 15, I
Okay.
was 14, got my first gym membership, but it was more of a survival thing for me. Like I
Okay.
started going to the gym. My sister and I, we moved out at a very young age. So she was 14, I was 15. So like the gym wasn't so much as going to build muscles. It was
Mm,
more so much survival for myself. So I got introduced at a young age. I was also playing competitive sports at the same time, and then just build up from there. Saw how it kind of changed my life and gave me control over my life when I had a lot of uncontrollable variables, and just
yeah.
pursued it as a profession.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So it sounds like, you and your sister already kind of had that. Did she join in with you and going to the gym and building kind of that same approach?
So that's a funny story, actually. So you hear when, if you've ever seen those photos where it's like they have the same upbringing, but one
Mm,
person ends on one side of the spectrum, the other person ends up on the other side of the spectrum. That's pretty much what happened. So I
okay.
gained my control through pursuing health and wellness, and she kind of went the other way.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Um, how did, throughout the years, obviously that difference gets larger for you two as if she's not pursuing fitness or health and wellness and you are, the differences become more and more significant. So in pursuing a relationship with her and, you know, also wanting the best, I'm sure, for her and wanting the best for yourself, how did you manage that expectation or that relationship?
Great question. How did I manage it? How do you save someone doesn't want to be saved, or how do you
Yeah,
instill your beliefs on someone who doesn't have the same ones? So I think the best way, especially having management background, is like you have to lead from the front line, right?
sure.
Like
Yeah,
you can pursue it to your degree, set the standard, and you just hope and you pray that it just inspires everyone around you, kind of
yeah,
kicks them in the ass. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's something that's kind of the way I've approached things as well in my life. I'm consider myself lucky to be able to coach my mom right now, and she's kind of breaking some generational health standards. She's the first one in her family to be really knowledgeable about nutrition, to really understand that getting strong is important, especially into her 50s, and so that's something that I've been really blessed to see play out, and that really started with her, bled into me and my sister, and so that's been cool to see that play out. But it was definitely one of those things where to try and force it down anyone's throat doesn't go well for the relationship or that habit.
Absolutely. They have to own it and it needs to be their decision. But good for your mom because that is huge. Like
Yeah.
people are now realizing that working out isn't superficial. It's not
Right.
about having big muscles. I mean, that is a plus side, but it's all about truthfully building like longevity and overall wellness. And that's huge, especially going into your 50s.
Yeah. Yeah. That is, and you try and have those conversations and educate as people within your family who know probably a significant amount more than them, but it's cool when you see them adopt it, and I'm proud as could be. So, but yeah, I wanted to talk with you about we had talked a little bit before we got on about you had a post talking about calorie counting versus macro tracking, and I think the distinction is not always clear to the general public. And so I'd love for you to kind of break that down, talk about how you work with your clients on that, and understanding the difference.
Absolutely. And I love this topic because you're not wrong. People understand calorie counting. They think that's like the end all to be all, but I
Yeah,
would say that's actually starting point. So with myself and Mind and Body by Temple clients, I always start with calorie counting because the reality is when someone puts food on their plate and they go to sit down, they have no idea what calories are and they have no idea what macros are, right? So like, yeah, I think I'm having the right portion sizes. And then when
yeah,
you actually get them to measure or create awareness around that, they're having 3 times the amount of calories in one sitting than they probably should, right?
yeah,
So I
yeah.
think
So
that's a big one. Yeah. So that's
yeah,
calorie counting is step one. So it's all about, I usually go MyFitnessPal for a reference point for them.
okay, sure,
And I say, we're not going to set any guidelines, but I want you to create awareness around the foods that you're putting into your body. So it's like track everything you eat for the next 7 days, and then we're going to sit down and we're going to dissect it. And sure enough, people are like, oh my goodness, that muffin I had was 450 calories. My coffee was 500 calories. People have no idea, right?
yeah. Yeah, I think the coffee example is a really great one. I think a lot of times when I'm working with clients or even just talking with friends about, how many calories are in, or, how many calories are we taking in, most people don't recognize that things like alcohol, things like, sugary drinks, smoothies even, smoothies are touted as really healthy, and they can be, absolutely, but they can be a lot of calories in your drinks, and they don't leave you quite as filled as many other foods. And so I think it's important for people to understand, like, okay, if you have a black coffee, that's one thing, but if you have you know white great whatever caramel macchiato with X number of pumps of whipped cream and sugar, and it can add up pretty quickly. um,
Absolutely. Like I have one client and she religiously has an ice cap every day. And I
okay.
told her, I said, okay, let's actually look at the macros of this and let's
Hmm.
tally this on the week. So that's how many additional calories you're having on top of everything else.
Yeah.
And when you really put things in perspective like that, it freaks them out a little bit because they had no idea, right? But it
Hmm.
truly does put things in perspective for people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's good to understand, like, people still can enjoy those things. But it's about picking and choosing, depending on what your goals are, right? But it's about picking and choosing, okay, what am I willing to give up in order to pursue healthier living, versus what is still enjoyable for me that doesn't have the negative health benefits. And so,
Absolutely. Like,
yeah,
there's no way that I'm telling her never to have an ice cap again.
right.
But it's like, maybe let's have one once a week and not every single day.
Exactly. Yeah. One of my clients who was really successful implementing a strategy like this, she was a big wine drinker, and it was, once or twice a day where she was having a glass of wine. And I'm like, okay, that's a lot of calories. That's a good chunk of your calories, and it's going to, slightly impair you know, your recovery in between your workout sessions. Um, and so it's something that we want to consider. And so I just kind of lined it out for her, and showed her, like, hey, these are the calories that you're taking in with your wine. What would you feel comfortable? I just left it up for her. What would you feel comfortable removing? Like, to what degree do you think you would feel comfortable? And we initially had agreed on 3 times a week, that she would go from basically 10 glasses a week to 3, which is a massive change. But then she felt so good about the results she got from that change a few weeks later, that she was like, you know what, I'm going down to 1. I can deal with 1 on the weekend with my husband, enjoying and out by a fire after dinner. Like, absolutely. Like, that's how you want to enjoy it, is enjoy the things, make it special. Um, and then it becomes that you enjoy those things even more because they are rare and not happening every day.
Absolutely. And if she's having 10 a week, she's not feeling the greatest the next morning. So
No.
as soon as she starts to cut it back and kind of rein things in, she's already feeling better. So there's
Yeah,
no way she's falling back into that habit.
exactly. Yeah, and she actually messaged me weeks later, after we had stopped working together, and saying like, "Hey, I'm doing even better. Things are really looking up, losing the weight." You know,
Woo-hoo. Good.
really exciting things to hear as a coach. You're like, yes, like someone who understood it, took it to heart, and is really seeing the benefits, and that's what we want.
Absolutely.
Um,
That's the best message you can get from a past client, truthfully. Everything
absolutely.
you've taught me is still working. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Kind of going back to our initial talk about the calories. So when you're introducing people to calorie counting, how long do you typically keep people in there, in that realm before moving on to the more specifics, doing the macros? Um, if you move them on at all, what does that process look like for you?
Absolutely. So it definitely varies individual to individual,
Sure.
depending on just lifestyle, habits. Are they new in the gym? Are they not new in the gym? So I
Right.
usually introduce actually calorie counting at about week 6 of the program. So I don't
Okay.
do it
Yeah.
off the get-go, just because I want to make sure they're building their small habits before that,
Yeah.
and they really rock
Absolutely.
those and nail those in. And then after that, calorie counting, and I usually do that for 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
And really make that a huge focus because like the first 2 weeks is all about teaching them. It's like,
Hmm.
"Okay, this is what you're actually eating, and this is where we wanna be." So just create awareness around that, and then from there, we kind of build out and go more macro focused. Because I do believe, like, as a health and wellness coach,
Yeah.
macro focused is where we wanna be with our clients, not calorie counting.
Right. Yeah. So can you talk to me a little bit about why? Like, I know where you're getting at, but for the people who are listening, I think it'd be really beneficial to hear, like, why do you make that change, and what are the benefits of macros, and understanding that.
Absolutely. So I always start with the calorie counting, and it's more so weight loss focus. So it's
Hmm.
all about the caloric intake versus your caloric expenditure. So that means the calories that you are burning versus the calories you are consuming. So
Yeah.
now I always shift my clientele to macro tracking. So coming from the weight loss specific focus to the wellness focus. So like our carbohydrates, our fats, and our protein all play a significant role in our overall well-being. So it's come from the cognitive energy to the physical well-being.
Yeah.
So carbohydrates specifically provide us with energy. Okay. And they're going to digest the quickest. Our fats and proteins, okay, digest at a slower rate. So they can keep us fuller longer. But they
Hmm.
provide us with energy. They protect our cells and our organs and also promote the growth. Okay. Also great for cognitive wellness.
Hmm.
Then you have your proteins, and they help us repair our muscles, muscle growth, also promote bone and cell growth. And they do digest at a slower rate than the carbohydrates. So, as you can see, it's a little bit more strategic from a wellness standpoint, but also for prolonging or minimizing hunger because they
Yeah.
all digest at a different rate as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really good thing for people to understand, that a lot of people don't, is recognizing that just not all foods are the same in terms of how you feel, how quickly things are digested and how quickly you're going to feel hungry again. And that is a massive key when it comes to eating for, your optimal health, is recognizing that, okay, if I can keep myself feeling hungry, keep myself from getting those hunger pains or hunger cues, like, it's going to be a lot easier to lose weight if I need to, or to maintain a healthy weight.
Absolutely. And the reality is, when you first introduce clients to calorie counting,
Yeah.
90% of those clients are going to be all carbs. Like all of those calories are coming from like 90% of carbohydrates.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
like, no wonder you were hungry all the time. Like, this makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. What I see often is when I'm working with clients, especially if I'm working with clients who have diabetes, is they've been taught about the difference, between some of the carbs and fats and proteins. But what they understand more than that is the difference between simple and complex carbs. They haven't really been taught about the satiating nature of your fats and your proteins, particularly about protein. That tends to be something that they're not as familiar with. So it's interesting to see for me with those particular clients. Okay, they understand the difference between these carbs, but they don't know that you can feel fuller when you move away from them, or when not necessarily move away, but when you just are eating less carbs and more protein, for example.
Mhm. And that's funny that you say that, because that is so true. Is that when you talk to diabetes, specifically type 2 diabetes clients,
Yeah,
it's all about simple carbs, complex carbs, but
yeah,
nobody builds importance around either carbohydrates or the fats. So
yeah,
that's huge. And that's good that you shift that focus with your clients, because it's rare. It truly is rare.
yeah. Yeah, and I think I imagine it's something we'll start to see as more. There's so much more available information on the importance of protein. I think people like you and I, all these coaches that are out there putting out the information of, hey, you need to eat more protein because you're going to feel more full. It's going to make weight loss easier for you, and you're going to build muscle. Like all these things are coming up, and now physicians are starting to pick those things up and I'm hearing more and more people referring to, um, people who can educate about these things, or educating their clients or their patients themselves. Which, if I'm an endocrinologist, or I'm, working with people who have diabetes, like I'm cramming that down their throat to say, hey, you need to eat more protein because this is what's going to help you feel full. What's going to help you, come off these diabetes medications that are tricky to get off of sometimes. So
Absolutely. And I think that's the biggest thing. And pardon me for saying this, but
go
there
for
is
it.
still a huge gap in our medical system. Is like,
Yeah.
we are giving people these drugs to cope with problem A, but they
Right.
aren't actually teaching them how to overcome the base root or the foundation of the issue.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
it is true. Like, we are trending a bit. So it is great to see. But I
Hmm.
do struggle with some doctors already, or still with clients,
Yeah.
because they're just pushing the drugs and they're not actually going to the deep root that's
Sure.
causing everything. But I guess
Yeah.
that's why we're in business, hey?
Yeah. Well, and that's there's so much to learn out there, right? And I think there's two things, right? You can go down the rabbit hole of, okay, some doctors have a symbiotic relationship with pharmaceutical companies, um, and
Mhm.
it benefits both of them to keep people on drugs. And it's a good, like, it is a solution. I'm not saying it's a good solution, but it is a
Band-Aid,
solution.
what?
Yes, Band-Aid is a great example. Um, so that there is some of that, and I don't know of anyone who's like that personally, but there is some of that going on. And then on the flip side, there's just, when it comes to the human body, there's just so much to learn, and these, I've been on the other side and kind of seen the medical system from within, the medical education system from within, and they're woefully unprepared to handle the kind of knowledge they really need as a physician. So I do feel for physicians in those spaces, because there's so much that they have to handle, and especially if it's a family physician who's
Oh my god.
managing a little bit of everything all over the place, like trying to do their best for their clients or their patients.
Well, let's be honest, they're managing what, 40 people in an 8-hour, maybe 9-hour window, right?
Yeah.
There's only so much that you can do, and that's
Right.
true. They can't
Yeah.
dig as deep as if you and I were to sit down with a client and
Right.
talk about how they're feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. I get you know at minimum 6 times the amount of FaceTime with my clients, um, within a week as if you were to go to the doctor every week.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
that's, you think about how long you break it down. Most people don't see their doctors, but every 6 months, even if they do have a special need on top of the general need. For example, diabetes being one
Mhm.
of those. Um, so yeah, and you think about breaking that time down, doesn't leave a lot of time for continuing education. So
Absolutely not. So that's exactly why we have our business, and that's why it's
right,
so important to work with some kind of holistic health and wellness coach or some kind of personal trainer,
yeah,
because the reality is that we're able to spend more time with you, ask more questions,
yeah,
and we do have most people have huge insight as to maybe there's some other solutions we can look at as well.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I wanted to back up a little bit, and just talk about, you had mentioned habit forming before you even get to the calorie counting. Is it okay if we dive into that a little bit?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you have this initial 6 weeks. What things, you know, you can take me step by step if you want to. What things are you really trying to hit hard early with your clients, in order to get them moving in the right direction?
Yeah. So it's about showing up, especially like if you're working with newer clientele that haven't been in the gym, haven't actually developed any kind of routine for themselves. It's like the hardest part is showing up. You just need
Yeah.
to make that your number one focus is show up, make sure you're prepared and you're pushing through this whole workout. Like
Yeah.
that's going to be our biggest focus the first 2 weeks. Then if you have passed that and we have like successfully completed the first 2 weeks of you showing up on time and absolutely rocking it, then from there, I start to introduce other lifestyle habits. So it's going to be increasing water intake is one of my number one focuses
Great.
because like our body, our mind, we're made up of 70% water and the average individual does not drink that much water. They drink
Yeah.
maybe 500 milliliters of water a day
Yeah.
and they wonder why they're suffering from stiffness, from being tired, brain fog. Drink some more water. Like
Yeah.
your brain is 70% water. That's a
Yep.
solution for you right there. So I focus on that with them and really instill that. And then from there, get into the calorie counting, getting to protein intake, and then just making sure that they're eating their vegetables as well. That's a
Yeah.
huge one. So
Yeah.
the first few weeks, those are the majority of the habits that we focus on.
Awesome. Yeah. That's so when you're approaching, eating your vegetables, is it like, hey, you're gonna have a vegetable with every meal? What does that look like?
It's like, hey, you're going to take your fists like this, and that's your vegetable intake at least to 2 to 3 meals of the day.
Yeah. Cool. That's
Mhm.
great. So yeah, that definitely, that's very similar to what I do with my clients, is getting them, just, can we get moving? Can we get water intake? Can we diversify what we're eating? And, make sure we're improving the quality of what we're eating. And then, yeah, now we're hammering on, okay, if we're losing weight, or, even if we're just trying to maintain, now let's take a look at what you eat. But you're you're about the mind, mind body wellness. That is, where does that play in to, all of that, and where do you really focus in on the mind?
So it's going to be depending on if I'm dealing with a pain-free client, like
Sure.
pain-free movement focused, or if it's a weight loss with my females, more so hormone focused. So
Okay.
let's
Yeah.
say I'm dealing with a female client. We're on a weight loss journey. We've looked over her hormones. A few things are out of whack. So that's when the mindset practices start to come into play. So I always say, once again, number one, just show up. Make sure you're
Yeah.
consistent. And then right around the 3 to 4 week mark is when we start to introduce more mindset practices. So if it's coming from either positive affirmations or we're doing some kind of gratitude, that's usually one of the first things that we do just to help create a little bit more awareness as to where they are mentally at the beginning of the day.
Yeah.
And then it kind of just carries over into everything they do. And once they build that a habit, then they have like their husbands making comments. They have their children making comments. Man, whatever you're doing, it's great. You're in a
Yeah.
great mood lately, right?
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. One of the things that I, talk about, a pain-free movement, being kind of a focus, and that's something that I've, pain working on pain management or mobility is one of the things that I particularly work with, is mobility in people who are over the age of 55, because that tends to be around the time that people just start accepting. And this is so sad to when I see it, is people accept that they're unable to do, accept the lie that they're unable to do X, Y, or Z. And it's like, no, we just need to work to to unlock that again for you. Because at one point or another, you were able to do that even as a child. And so the body is resilient. So one of the things that I even just this morning was working on with a client was like, hey, I know you have this pain. I know you're going to the doctor just to see about do you need an MRI? Is surgery necessary for this issue? But I want you to adopt this mindset of, my body is resilient. My body is capable. My body is strong. And despite, the pain that I'm feeling, I'm making strides in other areas that are rapidly improving. And so focusing, like you said, focusing on the positives, and then really going into that and saying, I can actually bounce back from this in a massive way. And so that's something that I really enjoy working on with people as well, is kind of taking that negative talk and turning it around, and saying, even if I have to undergo surgery, I can bounce back from it. And if surgery is necessitated, it's necessitated because there's going to be positive things on the other side.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
especially when you're dealing even with actually women in weight loss,
Mm-hmm.
but pain-free movement specifically, it's like injuries discourage people. When
Yeah.
people are in pain, they're discouraged, they're grumpy. So you always have to focus on the small wins. And I
Yes.
think that's a huge one. It's like the more you celebrate the small wins, the more it's going to build up to that end result. But
Yeah.
exactly with that, if you're working with someone, priming them to take on the surgery, you
Yeah.
kind of have to build the importance of building that muscle foundation before the surgery. Because if
Yeah.
they weren't working with you before that surgery, their recovery was going to be twice as long. So I think
Right.
that's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's definitely something worth noting, of like, talk about the recovery after the surgery is one thing that I have done time and time again. And I'm sure, you encounter this as well, is like, people don't recognize the importance of getting strong prior to a surgery, to come out on the other side that much further ahead. Because if I'm here before I go into surgery, and I'm all the way back here, okay, what if I push myself up forward and I build strength in all the other areas of my body, potentially even strengthen the same, say it's a shoulder, for example, strength in that same area, or range of motion in that same area. Now I'm setting myself up for success. And I'll use this example. So I worked in sports medicine for a while. So I worked with a hockey team, worked with a number of like baseball, softball teams. And I saw somebody tear a post tib tendon, because on a hockey skate, had sliced it right off. And we missed it. The doctor who saw him missed it initially. So they stitched him up, thought it was healing. He's like, hey, something's wrong, So we go get it looked at again, and they're like, oh my gosh, like this tendon is severed. And because of the time that it had, it'd been a couple weeks now, they're like, I don't know if we can reattach it.
Mm.
Come to find out, because with ice hockey, your tendons in your feet and ankles are so strong and so thick. He
Mhm.
actually had enough tendon left that the doctor, despite his concerns, was able to reattach it. And now he's skiing again. He's playing hockey when he wants to. This is years ago, but to see that, it lends itself to the understanding that if you strengthen beforehand, before a surgery, or if you're strong before a major tendon, major injury like that, it makes you that much more resilient to, to those things that just are going to happen, right? Accidents are going to happen. Life's going to happen. But if if your strength is on par, you're going to be able to manage it.
Absolutely. You're priming your body for that surgery. That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Taylor, we're approaching kind of the time that we want to be at. We've covered a number of really great topics. Is there anything that you'd like to add before we wrap things up?
I guess to the listeners is you don't need to go 0 to 100, and it is okay to go 0 to 10. Create sustainable habits for yourself, and then go 10 to 20, and then go 20 to 30,
Yeah.
and just make sure that you're implementing those on a day-to-day basis. You're showing up for yourself because at the end of the day, consistency wins.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you know, I've talked with people about the 3 by 52 method, and I don't know who popularized it, or I've heard Tony Gentlecore talk about it, among others. Is the person who works out 5 times a week, but then burns out after 3 months. That's a lot. That's a lot of workouts. But the person who does 3 times a week for a year ends up getting more workouts than that person who burns out. And so there, over the long term, it's easier. It's easier to move slowly, and to progress slowly than it is to go out all at once and completely change everything about your life. And so yeah, that's a great note to add. I appreciate you throwing that in there. Well, Taylor, where can people find you, if they're looking for you?
Absolutely. So I do have Instagram, so Mind Body by Temple, or you can find me on LinkedIn at Taylor Temple.
All right. Perfect. Well, we're going to wrap this up. Thank you guys so much for listening. Taylor, thank you again for hopping on here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jackson, for having me.